Hey, everybody, we're live here up at the Columbaria here in Brooklyn with friend of the site and reader and writer Clay Cormany. And I'm saying that right, the last name, right?
You
Okay,
are.
good. Good. My last name has like 16 pronunciations, so I get in trouble saying however you want. Clay is author based in Ohio, and yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your biography, Clay, and we can get a feel for who you are, where you're at, what you're up to.
Sure. I was for 28 years a writer and editor for the Ohio Department of Education. And that job entailed anything that involved writing, whether it was doing an annual report for the State Board of Education, whether it was writing letters for them, whether it was writing speeches for them. Sometimes it involved putting together comments just for them to make off the cuff if they were talking to constituents. Anything that involved writing usually drew me into their work. After 28 years there, I retired in 2008. And at the same time, overlapping that time with the department, I taught at Columbus State Community College as an adjunct instructor, primarily in public speaking, but also in basic English. We didn't call it remedial English, but that's basically the course that I taught there.
That's what I need. I got to take
Yeah.
that.
So that's the foundation for my writing in general. The way that I got into creative writing, fiction writing, I guess I would say began when my son, who's now 41, was playing Little League Baseball. And he would, often when I would watch those games, all sorts of weird things would happen. And I thought at one point it would sure be neat to write a book or some kind of story that would capture all these curious, off the cuff, strange, sometimes painful things that happened in Little League Baseball and turn it into a novel. So I started to do that. What happened to me in 2004, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Took care of that with surgery, but there was a period of about 3 or 4 weeks when I really couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't drive. I really couldn't go any farther than my front yard or backyard. So I thought, well, if I'm going to write this novel, this is going to be the time to do it. So I thought a little bit, and it occurred to me, girls read more than boys. So rather than make this story about a little league boys baseball team, why not make it about a girls softball team? Keeping the leading character a boy, a high school boy, who ends up through a series of errors and misunderstandings as the coach of this girls softball team. And that was the foundation that led to the first book, Fast Pitch Love.
That's great. Um, yeah, and if you're just joining us, you can always drop a question in the chat over there. Um, should be able to respond to them. Yeah. So yeah, it is kind of unfortunate that more girls read than boys. But to kind of hint on that for a second, what do you think we can do to amend that?
Well, that's a good question, and I wish I had a good answer. I suppose you could have more boys as the leading character. I'm not as widely read in young adult as I should be. For a young adult writer, I should do better job of reading young adult literature. But in most cases, it seems like there's a female lead character, and it might help if there were some more young adult books with a male as the lead character. The one notable exception that I can think of is The Perks of Being a Wallflower, with Charlie as the lead character and the chief voice in that book. But I still think the majority of young adult books probably have females as their lead character, and maybe more boys as the lead character would change that over time.
Yeah. Well, this, I mean, it's something I think about a lot with, with rural states where I grew up, Southern Illinois, and Southern Illinois is a book desert. Now it's improving slightly, but outside of the Barnes and Noble in Carbondale, and I think there's one that opened up in Mount Vernon. There's a brand new bookstore that opened up in Belleville. So you have like two independent bookstores now. Thank God there's two, and then one Barnes and Noble there in a 25,000 square
Oh
mile
gosh.
radius and 1.3
Yeah.
million people, which is, the Bronx, basically. It's like three Bostons, so imagine, three Bostons, no bookstores, right? And so it's just always heavy on my heart. I luckily had the Scholastic book fairs, before Walmart gobbled up everything, and um, some other things that kind of were inroads for me, but I didn't even realize. I think it's hilarious now, but to give you an idea of how sheltered I was from books, I didn't realize until I went to college how many books had been written about
Oh,
Jesus. It
yeah.
was like more than any
Yeah.
person in history, but I just had no idea. Let alone, all of these other subjects and things. It was mind boggling to me because the Brian Bennett Library was like the apex, and I checked out most everything that I could feasibly have checked out or read there, you know, growing up, along with friends' books and those sorts of things. And so yeah, it's always heavy on my heart, and it's a really great thing that women write and that they read, and that this is a really safe space in their careers, to promote. But it is also true that, like 75% of the industry is women, and of the writers, and so like a few more men reading, I think, could be sociological good, in the current epoch we find ourselves in. So so yeah, I am curious about that. Now it's interesting that you went the fast pitch love. Is that love for the game, or is
There's a
there a love
romance.
story here?
What happens
Uh,
is that the young man, Jace Waldron, the protagonist, sees a roster of his mother's girls softball team, and he sees a name on there that he believes is his love interest from high school. This is someone he has
oh,
worshipped from afar. But now that her big tough boyfriend is going out of town, and it looks as if she's going to be the assistant coach for this mother's team. Well, here's this bright idea. I'm going to be an assistant coach too. I'm sure my mom will let me join the team as an assistant coach so I can put the moves on Stephanie when the season starts. Well, as it turns out, it's her sister that is the assistant coach. And so his plan immediately goes awry. And
do you go full
no,
Taming of the
no,
Shrew on
no,
us
no.
here?
And, without giving too much of the plot away, the sister on the team, doesn't like Stephanie, the girl he's really after. She doesn't like her nasty boyfriend. So she tries to help him get together with, tries to get Jason Stephanie together. But in time, he develops a relationship with Sylvia, the sister, and at the end of the day, he realizes you can't base a romance or any kind of relationships simply on physical attraction. There has to be something there besides that physical attraction. And, he makes the right choice in the end. There is a nice incident at the end where he has to confront the nasty boyfriend named Carson, who's been away, who discovers that, in fact, Jace was dating Stephanie for a while, which gets him very angry at Jace. And they have a confrontation at the end, which kind of proves you have to play to your strength. I guess I'll say that. Jace is a cross country runner. And basically what he does is Carson wants to get fisticuffs going. And Jace says, well, we'll have fisticuffs, but we're going to run a race first. And if you can finish this race in a certain amount of time, we'll have the fisticuffs. If you can't finish in time, I win by forfeit. So
Did you ever have
a few
fisticuffs in
times.
high school?
I'm more like junior high school.
Really?
Not by high school. I learned not to do that to resolve.
You'd
Yeah,
beaten it
or
out
had
of
it beaten
yourself.
out of me. Or I learned to run. Got to be a good runner.
Oh man, my grandpa used to pick fights so much when he was little, and then kind of mellowed out. He was a short guy who just like felt they had to go in and box the first person he saw. But you did
Not
cross
in high
country.
school. I picked up long distance running when I was about 31, 32 as a good way to
Oh
keep
wow,
my weight
so late,
down.
yeah,
I was eating too much
yeah.
and putting on weight, and I really didn't like dieting. But long distance running up to a few marathons that I did was a good way to keep my weight
Wow,
down and stay in shape. Not so
you still do
much. The
that?
knees are working against me now. I do more.
Yeah, it's
I
rough.
do a little bit of jogging, but more bike riding now. It's a little easier on the knees, and still go maybe 25 or 30 miles on some days.
Do you race
Right. We
there
have a
in
big
Columbus or no?
fundraising for cancer research called Pelotonia. And perhaps some of
Oh,
your
okay.
followers are even aware of that or have taken part in it. It usually takes place in August, and there are different distances you can go, anywhere from 25 miles, I believe, up to, if you want to do the 2-day program, you can go up to close to 200 miles throughout central Ohio. And to take part, as I have a couple of times, you have to pledge a certain amount of money toward cancer research, either out of your own pocketbook or out of people you know.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, if you're just joining us, we're here with Clay Cormany. He's helped me read through the edits on Overmorrow, and he helped me
Oh,
see some
yes.
copies of
Love that
Bellhammers throughout
book. Love
the
Bellhammers.
Columbus. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've got both a sequel and a
Oh, my
prequel drafted,
goodness.
so we'll see if we can hit more. But yeah,
I
I didn't tell you about that. Yeah, there's one called Oil People that leads all the way up to the first chapter. That's basically how Beth got to Southern Illinois from Oklahoma. It's a month-long journey in a covered wagon in the 40s. And then the sequel is going to be about Brent and 11 carpenters stealing 1.5 million gallons of oil from the Patoka oil terminal overnight. So it's a heist. So yeah. So he's helped me get the word out on some of those, and he is currently talking about his book Fast Pitch Love. Do you have a copy with you?
I don't have Fast Pitch Love. I have the newest copy, the newer book. This is actually my galley copy of The Secrets
Oh,
We
great.
Carry, Journal of a
Secrets We
Girl
Carry.
in
Yeah,
Trouble.
sure.
I have galley written on there just so I don't confuse it with one of the books I'm
Sure.
now selling. And this
Sure.
this is a lot darker, to be honest. It's a lot darker than Fast Pitch Love and my second novel, The Bully Buster. This deals with
There we go.
sexual abuse in a school environment. And it starts off with a young man, a high school student, who one evening turns his backpack upside down, and along with his textbooks, there is this journal in there. Well, he thinks it's probably a prank being pulled on him by his lunchtime companions. So he doesn't take it too seriously, but when he starts to read it, he realizes that it was written by a girl in an abusive relationship. Doesn't use her name or make any references to any other buddy by name, but he figures that by looking at the classes that she talks about and some of the references to teachers that she makes, that he and his brainy friend Herbie can figure out who she is. And in fact, it doesn't take Colin and Herbie too long to find out who the girl is. The harder problem is finding out who the nasty boyfriend is, who she only refers to as Red Lion. And that is where the crux of the story revolves around. Who is Red Lion? How do they stop him? How do they bring him to justice? And as you might imagine, that proves more challenging and more dangerous than they imagined.
Is that is it? I mean, so she's still, alive. Nothing like terrible's. I mean, like terrible, but not. She's not like.
She's not.
It's not
She's
like a
not
murder
been
mystery
murdered. She's
situation.
being exploited. She's being abused. She's in
Okay,
a
gotcha.
relationship that's really against her will. And so,
Yeah.
they want to they want to get her out of this. They don't know how to do it. They're pretty smart in figuring out who she is. They look at the classes she's taking. Well, she's in Mrs. Rowland's first period English class. She's also in Mr. Blanchard's algebra class. So they get some class rosters and they cross-check them and narrow down the range of possible students who she could be. But they're not really sure who Red Lion is. They're not really sure whether that relates to his name. Does that relate to a car that he owns? Even a tattoo. At one point, they think maybe Red Lion is a tattoo on some guy's arm. So they follow a lot of wrong leads before actually stumbling quite accidentally over the guy's real identity.
Gotcha. Yeah, the reason I asked that because it reminds me a little bit of. I mean, some of the start of what you were saying reminded me a little bit of The Virgin of Small Plains. Some of it of like 13 Reasons Why, and some of these like journal entries and things like that you would find in these situations. But it sounds more like they find this thing, use it to find this victim, and through interaction with her, try to figure out this other.
They
entity.
try that, they try. And in fact, the way that Colin tries to get more insight into her situation is by actually dating her when he does find out who she is. And even that doesn't actually reveal as much as he thought. It's really quite by accident that they discover who Red Lion is.
Okay. Is it no like urban
No,
fantasy elements?
it's quite
right?
realistic. In fact, it's
straight.
I almost want to say it's too
Okay.
realistic. A lot of the background, a lot of the inspiration for the story came from information that I came across when I worked for the State Board of Education of Ohio. There were lots of disciplinary
Gotcha.
issues that came before the state board. There were bulletins that we got about things going on in Ohio schools that probably happen in other schools as well that were really quite disturbing, quite sad, really. And drawing on those raw materials, that is how this latest book came about into being.
Mercy. Yeah, when you first started talking about the Board of Education stuff, I talk about speech writing. I almost have you
Parts
seen The
of
West
it, but
Wing?
not consistently.
Okay. I almost joked at one point. I was like, you sound like the Sam Seaborn of the Ohio DOE. But yeah, it sounds like you had to really kind of wade through the trenches there to come across, some more horrific stuff.
Yeah, it was often educational in a way you wouldn't want it to be, to either be at the meetings. One of my tasks at those meetings was to sign in speakers, people who wanted to speak to the board on any subject that they wanted to, or on something that was on their agenda. But there were also cases of disciplinary action against educators that came to them as well that were really quite disturbing. And then when the board wasn't meeting and I was doing my speech writing and editing and other things, I would get news bulletins from different parts of the state from newspapers that would come to us, even from places perhaps as small as Athens, Ohio, or Springfield, that would, tell about
Sure.
very unpleasant things going on in school, things that had nothing to do with learning, that that showed you that, beneath the surface of the learning and the interaction between students and teachers, there were a lot of things going on that were scary, frightening, the very thing that the book deals with.
Were you over
I
Greenville,
know where
Ohio?
Greenville is, on the west.
Were they were
Yeah,
they under
Greenville,
your
Ohio is
jurisdiction or
in
no?
Darke County, I believe. And I've
Yeah.
been there. There was a state board of education member there named Dick Baker who had a hog farm, I believe. And it's a rural area, very scenic, not the most populated part of the state.
Yeah. The reason I ask is my Tara's uncle was mayor of Greenville for like
Really?
full term
Really?
limits. Yeah. Yeah. So we see them at the Great Dark
Yes,
County Fair
yes,
every now and
yes,
again. One of the novels that I've worked on that's in the background is called
yeah,
Arcanum Dark County, and which is just evocative in itself. But it's a small town horror, kind of based on some of the characters we met at the fair. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of all the different parts of Ohio. But yeah, I didn't know if you covered that. I know it's Scalzi. John Scalzi's out in. I can't remember the name. It's real close to Greenville. It's like Braden or
I
something
know
like
of
that.
John. I've even met him briefly
Yeah.
at a school fair. It
Oh,
was
really?
quite a few years ago. He probably doesn't remember me, but
Oh, yeah.
he came along there
Sure.
with the young adult, the young horror writer Stein. I'm trying to think of his first name. He writes children's level horror stories. Um,
Oh, yeah.
can't think of his name. Stein is the last name. R.L. Stein. R.L.
Oh, R.L.
I
Stein.
met,
Yeah,
I met
yeah.
him
Like
and
the
John
Stein.
just ever so briefly at the Ohio Book Fair. This has got to be
Wow.
at least 8 or 9 years ago.
Did you notice R.L.
I did
Stein's
not.
fingers? He chicken pecks, and his first
Oh,
fingers are like nubs now because he did that for so long it like wore them down. So he now types with his middle
I didn't
finger.
know that.
All of his books chicken pecked. So I didn't mean to flip everybody off, but yeah, he did pecs like that, and then switched his middle finger once he wore
Oh
out his
gosh.
pointer fingers, and so yeah, he's a fascinating guy. But yeah, John's a really sweet dude. I met him, on a couple of occasions, Comic-Con most recently here, and I hope at some point I'll get to go down and interview him when I'm down in Greenville. I don't know if that'll ever happen or not, but he's done a lot for the speculative fiction community, through the SIFWA board and all the different stuff. So he tends to host. Not a lot of people know this who aren't directly to host like a dance party disco at Worldcon, and so he'll curate the music and then just like be the DJ of this.
Yeah, you wouldn't associate him with that.
So yeah, it's great. So he's a hoot. Well, cool. Yeah. Now I'm looking here. I mean, we can talk some more about Secrets We Carry if you want. You said some of the sales of your book is going to help
Right.
victims of abuse, right?
Basically, and I don't know whether the book is going to make 60 cents or $6,000. It had a good launching, by the way. Made $600 within the first week or two of it being launched. That includes the launching at a local arts facility here, and then 2 book fairs that followed at Newark and a little town of Lithopolis.
Yeah.
So basically, 1/3 of the revenue is going to go to the Ohio Domestic Violence Network. Another third will go to a national organization, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which goes by the acronym RAIN. And then I'm keeping 1/3 of the revenue to pay for, among other things, an update in my author website, which badly needs updating, to purchase space at book fairs, book festivals,
Yeah.
because those fees, as you know, those fees can range anywhere from maybe $25 or $10 up to a couple of $100, depending on how much space you want. And then I also need to take into consideration buying my own books. You know, when the publisher sells her books to me, and I need to have some money for that. And I'm very lucky to have found Van Velzer Press, because the owner of that publisher, the owner of that publishing house, is very, very easy to work with, very friendly, and has given me a lot of support so far in the early going.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I would love to find a book fair in New York that had a $25 table. That'd be amazing. It's tricky. I guess if you split both days at the NYC Poetry Festival in Governor's Island, technically that's $50 a day. But yeah, most of them are 100 and up easily. I think there's 4 of us splitting a table at Brooklyn Book Festival, and it's going to be close to 200 a piece. So it's, and that, I mean, that's the biggest one here, but it's just, it's a lot for sure.
It depends, as I've learned, it depends upon how much space you need.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get at the Columbus Public Library's book fair that will come in July, you can get a whole tent for yourself. I think for about what you're paying in Brooklyn, about $200.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's a lot more economical just to get a table of maybe 4 or 5 feet that will give you enough room to advertise your material without going broke in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a lot of like little tricks like that. One of the things that I've noticed actually is since there aren't gobs and gobs of people who are writing books necessarily that are going to see this, I think it's going to be more your readers and mine. I feel okay kind of revealing this hack, if you will, but it's often I find more beneficial, like a blue ocean strategy, to go to like craft fairs or like rock festivals, because you're the only author there. And so people come there to buy, like at a Brooklyn Book Festival. On the upside, everyone's coming to buy books, even Comic-Con. They like drop a lot of money on stuff, and you can sell a lot, you can move a lot of stuff because they're all like concentrated for that. And that's good, but it's also expensive. But there's also this like low barrier of entry to like Rockaway, which is Rockaway Beach. What's it called? Rockafest or something? I don't know. There's a music fest that's gonna be at Rockaway Beach, and it's got like equivalent table price. There's literally no one else.
Now I have to ask you a question, Lancelot.
It's all like,
when you do this, do the other people who are there object to you? Do they find it objectionable that you're?
No. I mean, you gotta ask them. They're like, what kind of books you want to sell? And you just like, you talk it through, in the email. But like, as long as the dates work and you pay money, I mean, I just take it as a chance to hobnob with people, just like shaking hands, kissing babies situation, and just like, I'm not a politician, but like, I find everyone I meet to be fascinating, and I want to be friends with everyone, even though like I'm completely fine when people don't like me. I really find people interesting. And so, I just generally want to get to know the people that are in booths next to me, and that tends to play out well. And then sometimes, there's a press called, oh gosh, it's got some ridiculous name, Whiskey Tit Press. And they come to the Brooklyn Book Festival all the time. And I asked them, when I was next to them, the first Brooklyn Book Festival I did, I was like, why Whiskey Tit? And she pulls out the largest bottle of Jameson I have ever seen. Like comically big Irish whiskey, and immediately pours it down. She says, "This is why, laddie, we bring one to every show." And they just like that was at the start of the day, and they emptied it
Oh,
with the crowd throughout the day, just like pouring
oh
free
my God.
shots for people, and people just hung out around their booth. And so like, you run into people, and so I think, especially for the ones that aren't book festivals, I think, people are cool, and they're like, oh, you made a thing, that's cool. And especially if you spend, I try to support the artists around me. So if you spend money on their quilt coat, or their sun catchers that they made for the window or whatever, like that kind of is reciprocal. And then they'll tell people, oh yeah, he's selling this, that, and the other, and kind of just support each other and talk each other up, and people get interested. I think it's a good spot to do it. And I've also learned, I haven't tried this at a bigger festival yet, but I've learned, generally speaking, to, like, I'll put one copy of this on the table of each one, and everything else is under the table in the box. And then they'll look at it, and unless they get like super attached, like, no, this is my book, which I get. But unless they get like that, I actually sell out of the box. And so it's more like a Apple display set rather than just like bargain book situation. You know what I mean? It kind of reduces the noise, and you can just talk about the one that's in front of them. Unless like a huge crowd comes, then I can pull more out. They want to see that or whatever. I'll pull out a copy. But that's tended to be my strategy: out in front of the table, greeting people, that kind of thing, and just
It's
you know
good. I have found,
that's been
somewhat
good.
along the lines that you're talking about, that your fellow authors at these book fairs are not so much competitors as they are comrades,
Oh,
comrades in arms, trying to improve literacy. And we
oh
look
yeah,
out for
yeah.
each other. At this Newark Book Festival that I went to right after my launching, we had a terrible wind coming through this outdoor shelter. Was basically what it was. It was extended like a picnic shelter, a roof but no sides,
Oh mercy.
and the wind was just knocking over displays left and right. Um, in some cases, damaging swag type things that were available to people. So this young man next to me gave me a couple of bricks to steady my posters and my placards down so they didn't blow away. And we got along very well. And I put in a good word for him later on when I got home and thought about someone who might like his fantasy book, and made sure that I emailed a copy to my niece, who's the one who likes this kind of books, and helped him out a little bit.
That's great. Yeah, to think that this is a zero sum game is absurd to me. I know a guy who was he joked when we went up to Anchorage together. He was like, "This is the house that Brown built. Don't tell anybody I said that." But it was a 4 theater complex, the Anchorage Center for the Performing Arts and the Alaska Repertory Theater, that he secured money from the state legislature a long time ago to build in downtown Anchorage. It's like the heart of downtown Anchorage. In addition to that, there were probably 5 or 6 other theater companies, and they used to be so competitive and at war over each other, as if it was like, this is the funds that we got. And they realized in the midst of that was actually counterproductive. It was creating an antagonistic environment, and why would it need to be a zero-sum game? So they decided to start collaborating over sharing the pool, in order to make as many theater companies and organizations thrive as humanly possible within Anchorage, and teach Anchorage that we are a theater town. And as they did that, the allocation of money grew because people wanted more of better things. And so this, that their argument was, it grows like grape clusters. Theaters grow like grape clusters. They don't, it's not a zero sum game. It's not a redwood tree planted over a single source aquifer that just sucks it dry. It actually increases the pool. And I think that's the case with books. There's a reason. One second. Sorry, someone's knocking on the door. There's a reason that New York still to this day has such a high literacy rate and such a high rate of like advanced readers copies. It's like, yeah, all the publishers are here, that sort of thing. But like, you just run into people all the time. There's someone down in Industry City we know is an illustrator for a very specific group, a very specific book. We didn't even know they were in town, and there was another one who just like, at one of the co-ops down the way, lives just upstairs of a friend's house that we were visiting yesterday for lunch. Like, wait, they live upstairs? It's like, we should do a reading. It's like, yeah, we'll host a wine night. Like, had no idea that this illustrator was there. And just over time, more and more people writing and sharing books. I've got advanced readers copies here from like, 6 different neighbors and things like that. And I'm not even, I'm nobody. I'm not to the point where like, Ellen Datlow or Scalzi who's just getting books in the mail every day. I mean, I get requests for ARCs a lot, but not to the level where he's stacking up 20 books for a Tuesday, and I think that just a kind of a testament. The free libraries, as you've used and helped me with, and other things, I think it just builds up that culture of literacy. But mindful of that, like what, you've got a second, a second book, or your second book we haven't talked about. But before we talk about that, I'm kind of curious, like what's your, you got 3 books out. Are you wanting to like just keep publishing it until you're done? You only got, there's some people like, I got a book in me. Some like, I got about 3 books in me. And then some people just like, no, this is what I'm made to do. When I write, I feel his pleasure, So
I might have one more book in me if my wife can stand it. But if I do another young adult book, and I'm thinking about one, I'm going to have to get a younger co-author. I think that would help me a lot, because one of the problems in the early drafts of The Secrets We Carry is that too often my language sounded like it came from a 74-year-old college graduate. It didn't sound like a 16 or 17-year-old boy. And, that damages the realism of the story, hurts the credibility of the story. So I need a younger co-author to kind of catch those mistakes in the bud, and perhaps to just give some fresh blood to the whole writing process for me. One of my problems that I have, and it probably goes back to my days as an editor, is that I spend too much time on a sentence or a paragraph or even a single word. As an editor, I had to be careful to look at other people's writing, make sure that it was grammatically correct, free of spelling errors, free of inconsistencies. And in that mindset, that worked well as an editor, but taking that mindset into a writing career or even a writing serious hobby, it made the process so much more difficult, so much more elongated. I would spend a half an hour on a single word, trying to look for the right word. And I've gradually gotten away from that, not easily, but I think with a younger co-author who can, keep me moving along, who can add his or her own ideas to what I'm putting into the story, will free me up from that tendency from my editorial days.
Yeah, that could, it might also be just like trying a different genre. I mean, or sometimes like watch a lot of Twitch, like get on Twitch and watch a bunch of games.
That's possible. I've always suspected that I've been drawn to young adult writing because I didn't think I was real cool in high school back in the late 60s. And writing young adult gives me the chance to relive those days and be more confident and more secure in myself than I was as a 16 or 17-year-old back in 1967.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing. It's possible to write. Madeline Engel kind of says all the time, like, what makes it young adult, what makes it adult. She's like, I don't know. She authored The Wrinkle in Time and Walking on Water. She says, I don't know. Her editors and the adult readers was like, you can't put the word tesseract in the book. A child won't know what that is. She says, this book has been through I don't know how many reprintings. Every single child I ever interacted with gets what a tesseract is. The only people that have ever had a problem with it were adults. So I don't. And Diane Duane's the same way in her Wizard series, Young Wizard series. It's like, gosh, she, in the first few chapters, the kids come across the sentient white hole, and like, she doesn't go through this huge physics problem. She just like, the white hole has a personality and does what white holes do, is just eject all kinds of like things like Harrier jets and, like just fully formed. So sometimes I think that can just be overwrought. Like C.S. Lewis talked about this in one of his, I don't know if it was on Writing for Children. It was in his, got it up there somewhere. It was in his, I think, as Of Other Worlds, where he said like what separated literature for him in his mind was not like YA, for instance, was less about whether or not kids would read it or whether or not adults would read it, but rather he liked fantasy as a kid and he likes it as an adult. And the people that he came across that didn't like it as kids never liked it as adults anyway, And so I think that those borderlines are probably softer than either he experienced or were the case in the early 20th century, but people are just much more cynical, it seems to me, in literature. And it seems like a lot of that has opened up. But I think that those lines are probably harder lines than like the age, because you can come across like super genius savant 11-year-olds that like haven't gone through puberty yet, but like can discuss quantum mechanics rather lucidly. And then all kinds of, or very, very mature young 9-year-old girls who are emotionally mature but are lacking intellectually or whatever. Like people are just people. So I don't know that I would fuss too much over that, but like maybe listening to Twitch for the slang in their dialogue might help. But I don't know that I'm the best exemplar either. Like
the one thing I did was to listen to watch some movies, some movies that dealt with teenage life, and to try and think of the jargon that they use, the terms that they use. And that helped me a little bit with The Secrets We Carry, to make the dialogue more realistic for contemporary teens. And there are different strategies that you can use in this situation. I just think maybe having a younger co-author would save time,
Well, it certainly saves time. Yeah. Well, it can. I should say it can save time. If you got a really good co-author relationship, it can work really well. There are other instances where it will take 10 years. I can say that from experience. So just depends. It is, collaboration is how artists delegate. And just like any delegation situation, there's people that take to the task and people that don't, so but yeah, if you have someone that wants to at least at least meet you in your level of work and has some skills, like, yeah, I think that can be super helpful for sure. I've got one specifically co-authored book in my head that I've wanted to do for a long time that would require an older woman, and it's a epistolary back and forth, but just haven't. I've asked a lot of author friends, and there's a lot of people that are just like, I don't do collaborations anymore. Brooklyn says hi. So that's a good thing to shoot for. And it seems like most of you, let's see, you've got fast pitch.
You got stuck here. I hope you can solve that issue.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. It's okay.
Blanked out on me.
That's okay. That's all right. I didn't go anywhere. Yeah, Fast Pitch Love was the first book the second was the Bully Buster,
Yeah.
about a group of high school kids, very smart, who are being bullied, and to defend themselves, they build a robot
Oh,
that
okay.
is going to take on the bullies when the bullies come after them. Unfortunately, in at least one situation, the robot is not used in the right way. It's used selfishly, to go after somebody who is not a bully. So, and the essence of that story is that, when you try to take revenge, that one of the main themes is, the long range harm that bullying does. And also, when you try to take revenge, innocent people often suffer.
Yeah.
Those are the two main messages that come across from the Bully Buster. And
Yeah, it's
again,
great.
a lot of the material for the book, or the inspiration for the book, came from things I saw as a worker, as an editor for the Ohio Department of Education. I tried to make this book particularly relevant and particularly accurate by talking to an engineer at nearby Otterbein University. And I wanted to make sure that the description of the robot was mechanically, technically accurate. And he gave me a lot of insight as to how a robot with this purpose would look, how it would function, what kind of internal mechanisms would allow it to operate in the way that it does. So even though I write fiction, I try to be as realistic as I can. Going back to the first book, Fast Pitch Love, I went to half a dozen or more girls' softball games to get a feel for the interaction that went on among the players, between the players and the coaches, between people in the audience, perhaps getting a little too involved in the game. I wanted to make that realistic, in terms of what goes on in a girls' softball game.
But the robot situation, that's more speculative fiction, right?
I suppose it goes in that direction. It's a little bit of a genre bending type of book, because it does have some speculative elements in it. It does have some science fiction elements in it. Although it's certainly plausible to think, when we look at how technology has permeated our culture today, it's easy to
Sure.
see how something like this could be done. How
Sure.
you build something, and the machine itself isn't that complicated or that big. It just has a purpose that maybe a lot of us wouldn't think a robot should have.
Um, See, yeah, and I mean, to have children build one, I mean, like, possible, but I'd have to read it to know, like, how like near future situation that is, but like, but that is like,
One way I try to get around being an old fogey writing young adult is to try to make my characters precocious in some way. The students who build this robot are AP physics students
sure,
who take part in competitions, science competitions, have won science competitions. And in fact, there's references to some of the other devices that the students have made, when they're competing in science fairs. So it's not too much of a stretch to think that working together collaboratively, they could come up with a robot that could do the kinds of things, defensive things, that this robot does.
well, see, this is kind of interesting to me because, I mean, far be it, one of the most annoying things to me is always like, Lance, you know what you should write? And I have like, let me stop you there because I got a document of 150 story ideas that I haven't touched yet. Um, so like, I know what it feels like on the receiving end for like, what you should write. It's because, we have our own projects and those sorts of things. However, like that disclaimer, there was a series called The Laundry Files that was complicated for many reasons. But the premise of it is essentially kind of like an MI6 or like John Le Carre situation, uh, like a spy novel, but the things that they're after are these eldritch horrors, like Lovecraftian, horrors. And one of the things that's kind of on the up and up right now are these kind of speculative fiction cozy novels. So they're like novels about like smaller parts of society, or they could be as simple as like a Mr. and Mrs. Beaver kind of situation, right, where it's like or like Watership Down kind of talking animals in a tea time situation or whatever. But something that I haven't come across in any way, but that is like touching on these sorts of things that I've seen, is someone within the Department of Education who starts getting problems that come to them that are speculative in nature. And so like that might be a way to tease out some of these issues that you came across while still talking as an adult, because then you would be able to write about your experience. But it's far enough removed from like some of those things that the things you encounter can be, like in this case, robots, or like think about that scenario of someone bullying someone with a robot, but from the DOE perspective, that's a very different kind of thing to deal with, right? So not saying that that's what I have to do, but that's where my mind goes. Like, you have this fascinating career that like I haven't encountered anyone that had that experience, and then also this urge to write with some like speculative experience. I'm curious, like, what happens if things start coming across your desk and like, oh, so and so unearthed such and such monster, because that's always what's happening in almost all of these YA novels. Even this one, like, students come across something crazy, but we never see on the DOE side when they got to deal with all of these young adult students coming across these monsters and aliens and stuff. Does that make sense?
It does. The thing that I thought was interesting about Overmorrow was how it seemed to bring so many different fantasy worlds together. As I think I mentioned in the critique that I sent you, there's touches of Oz, there's touches of Alice's Wonderland, there's touches of Middle Earth and Narnia, and some elements that don't belong into any particular wonderland of the past that I thought made it very appealing and very challenging at the same time. But certainly the kind of book that I wouldn't put down. I kept forging ahead, even if at any given time I wasn't quite sure what was going on.
Well, that's problematic for sure. But it kind of wrote it like a fever dream. But it definitely has that. But whether or not dialoguing with all of those different traditions is helpful or not in that scenario, it's definitely got polarized responses. I mean, a lot of 1 and 2 stars and a lot of 4 and 5 and not a lot of 3. I mean, like, it's inverted bell curve. But
you have to trust the writer. I know you. I know that based on Bell Hammers, I know that even if I don't exactly know what's coming up next or where this is going, I know that if I stick with it, the investment of my time will be worth it in the end.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. But there's a way to, like, this is, that's dialoguing with like a bunch of different fantasy traditions in a way that like the main monster in this is destroying all thresholds. It's not to this world. It's the wardrobe, it's Diagon Alley, it's like all of these other things. So in that way, it is kind of a metafiction, like a Ready Player One or some sort of thing, which is that's almost like in some ways it can create emotional distance because it's one step removed, because it's observing the genre from here. Whereas a more serialized thing, kind of like The Blacklist, or kind of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or even what was one about the witches, the 3 sisters, not Wicked. I can't remember the name of it, but it was on TNT or something for seemed like forever. Those seer, like, today we're getting like Monster of the Week kind of things. Like Hercules was like that. The Witcher was like that. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking of, where like it's less Monster of the Week and more like this dumb teenager came across this crazy thing this week. And I think in those kinds of scenarios, you're not going to end up in the difficulties that I ran into uh, with Overmorrow. But you could, if you wanted to, I mean, that's the plot of Animorphs. Kids find alien in a dumpster. That's the plot of, like, the Tripod series. It's like, so many different things have so and so stumbles upon something in a backyard or crosses some threshold, or even Harry Potter, like, he, like, it starts out with him in, like, annoyingly upper middle class Britain with, like, a bully cousin, and making a piece of glass vanish with a snake coming out, like, just like weird stuff starts happening. So I'm just kind of curious what the superintendent and the DOE would have to say about all this stuff happening in their schools. Maybe that's just me, but here's a quick question for you. So there are a bunch of movies filmed in the Columbus metropolitan area. So there's Teachers in 1984,
Right.
Tango and Cash in 89, Little Man Tate in 91, Air Force One in 97, Traffic in 2000, Speak in 2004, Bubble in 05, Liberal Arts in 2012, Parker in 13, I Am Raph in 2016, Aftermath in 17, They Them Us in 2021, Bones and All in 2022, and Ready Player One in 2018, which was set in Columbus, though it wasn't filmed there. Of all of those, which is your favorite?
Well, the only one that I can really relate to was Teachers.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was filmed. I think Ralph Macchio was in that. The Karate Kid was in that. And the school in question was Central High School, which at that time had just been, closed down, just
Sure.
from a reorganization in the Columbus City School District. That building was left empty. By the way, it is now our COSI, our Center of Science and Industry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was turned into that later on, but at the time that movie was done, I think in the early 80s, it was empty. So it was perfect for having that movie made there. And, I remember Nick Nolte, his frustration with the parents. The parents seemed to think that it was entirely his responsibility to teach their kid. And, instead of it being a shared responsibility, I remember that Royal Dano, the teacher that had the orderly classroom, but his students didn't really learn anything. And in fact, when he died in the middle of a class, they weren't even aware of it. They went and turned in their papers while he's lying dead over his desk or in his chair. And, his classroom was still orderly, and his students didn't even miss him. They didn't even know he was dead. But everything was orderly, as if orderliness by itself, in and of itself, was the objective of teaching. So I really could relate to that one when it came out. I got to admit, a lot of the ones that you mentioned, I'm not too familiar with.
That's all right. Yeah, I haven't seen all of them either. I was just curious because it's in your backyard.
Air Force One was there.
Yeah, Air Force One was set there, and a couple of, like Ready Player One is set in Columbus. One of the premises of that is that with all of the fiber optic stuff they installed around the region, that became the tech center of the future. So a lot of people wanted to move to Columbus to be closer to high speed internet.
Okay.
But yeah, and then some other
movie, a Robert Redford movie was made there, Brubaker.
All right.
Again, maybe in the mid 80s. It was filmed at the Columbus. It was about a prison warden and all the issues that arose at this maximum security prison, which in fact was the Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus, which again was empty at the time. So it made for a good setting of the movie. And it's been so long since I've seen it, I don't remember too much about it. But I know that they tried to recruit a lot of local actors to be the prisoners in the background, while, while Robert Redford was doing his thing. There had to be a lot of other prisoners behind him, interacting, eating cafeteria food or whatever. And they recruited from the Columbus area actors who would like to have a small part in that film. I guess I could have tried out, but I missed out.
You never done man, for a second I thought he was Cool Hand Luke, but that was Paul Newman. Just double checking that. You never done like a extra work or?
No, I've done, I did theater in high school and college, but nothing filmed in that nature.
Oh, it's great. I love doing it. It's fun stuff. Even the extra stuff. Not a lot of people realize this, but I was an extra on a Baz Luhrmann film one time. So, which is wild. Everyone's fabulous. Everyone's the star. Everyone's in glitter and everything else. He's like, you are all stars. Everyone here, like, he's like, and he'd point to us, you and you and you. The crowd of like 200 people. So yeah, it was a wild time for sure. A lot of guys in chaps that had no butts on the back. You know what I'm saying? Like, where am I right now? I was not, but but it was a wild set. So yeah, man. Well, cool. Well, let's pull up your book one more time. I want to get like a final. I'll make me small so that everybody can see it here. And yeah, it's called The Secrets We Carry. It's coming out, and it's a galley copy right now, but yeah, it'll come out very soon. And then we got
Lance. It actually is out.
It is out right now. Do you
have
it
out now? As of end of, it had the official launching in May, but it's actually been on the market since the end of March.
Great. Okay. All
so
right.
It's out
sorry,
there
I had the galley thing in mind, but that's just your galley. Okay.
Yeah.
So Secrets We Carry by Clay Cormany is out, and then he's also got the Bully Buster and the, I'm gonna say it wrong, not the Pitch of Love. What was it? Fast Pitch Love. Thank you. Sorry, my mind went blank. Yeah, Fast Pitch Love and the Bully Buster and the Secrets We Carry by Clay, and you want to pick those up soon and look forward to his next novel, whether it's realistic YA with a co-author or if it's the Department of Education dealing through speculative fiction stuff. I'm just giving him a hard time at this point, but yeah, I'm sure his stuff is just going to be a wonderful addition to your shelf. I have learned so much from him and been grateful for his contribution. We were doing the circus over the pandemic, the literary journal we ran, and for his graciousness in putting bellhammers out there in the Ohio community. Maybe we'll set a movie there someday when I'm able to do film rights or something like that. Well, maybe we can be in Clay's backyard. But everybody check out those books, and we will talk at you soon. We're going off live here, and thank